When I was 11 years old and Avatar The Last Airbender first aired on Dutch television, I could have never imagined how big an impact this series would have on me. And not just for the impeccable character arcs and world building. Oh no, Avatar did something no other show had done for me before. It gave me a character I could relate to. Toph Beifong is unique in many ways, from her incredible earthbending skills to being blind and abrasive and overall smashing any expectations you might have for her on first glance. The show even cleverly puts this expectation on the viewer when she first appears in the arena. We see big, muscly guys smashing rocks at each other for a good while, until the final match is announced.
Now, the moment you've all been waiting for.
We see a shot panning up to the sky while Toph raises her victory belt. Everything screams champion. And then... oh, she's small. She's comically small next to these two ladies. So what I'm about to argue isn't that the creators, or heck even the viewers, are unaware of Toph's gender non-conforming nature. Clearly, the show knew this right from her introduction, and it's one of the biggest staples of her character. What I am about to argue is that it goes much deeper than you might have imagined. Analyzing the show as an adult, I made my young teen self so happy by what I discovered, because when I was 11, I didn't feel like a girl. I never wanted to be one. And standing on the brink of puberty, becoming a woman, whatever that meant, was not an option for me. I didn't have words like non-binary or transgender to describe myself yet. I didn't even have older role models in my surroundings I could look up to understand what I was feeling. I just had Toph. To understand why Toph had such a big impact on me, I first need to explain the concept of gender in 2D animation. Which sounds ridiculous, right? What is there to explain? You draw the women's, you draw the men's. Easy. Well, not quite. When you draw, there is no perceivable world. You start with a daunting blank page. Therefore, the one who draws creates. If you don't like the world you see before you can make a brand new one, with whatever rules applies. This means, at least in theory, that you can rewrite the rules of what is possible, even gender. Two of the earliest examples of rewriting these unspoken rules were popular cartoons, and at the time there was no notable resistance from theater audiences towards this kind of depiction. Gertie the Dinosaur is a 1914 animated short film that hasn't really lost its charm after a century. Gertie acts at times like a dog, is sassy towards her creator, and cries like a human. She also does this. Nothing about her appearance indicates to us that she is a girl dinosaur, just her name and pronouns. Another example is the comic and then animation Crazy Cat that has publications running from the 1910s all the way up to the 1940s. Crazy's gender is never made clear and appears to be fluid. The creator even admits that Crazy is something like a sprite, an elf. They have no sex, so that cat can be a he or a she. The cat's a spirit, a pixie, free to bud into anything. You know what? Sprite, I'll take it. Crazy also has an unrequited love for a mouse named Ignatz, who throws bricks at Crazy. He is male. He is a cat. Can I make it any more obvious? It's OG Tom and Jerry with gender fluid Tom and kinky Jerry. These two examples show that 2D animation didn't find its start with gender signifiers. Then how come that in 2007, almost a century later, Toph was so significant in her gender nonconformity? For that, we have to go to the mouse. Other mouse. Yeah, thank you. Now, I'm not saying that Disney is the sole reason that sexism exists in animation. That would be hyperbolic and unfair. But existing biases in the real world trickled in, no thanks to a lack of input from female creators at Walt Disney Studios. Not through a fault of their own, mind you, a position like top animator and director could only be filled by men. On average, they earned 40 times the wage than the repetitive inking and painting work did, positions the women were allowed to hold. This meant that women only got to finish the ideas and drawings the men had created, and not pitch their own ideas and design female characters. This is why male characters got to have personalities, and female characters became a bunch of signifiers. Eyelashes, blushes, skirts, heels, all stereotypes to separate the female from the male model. Especially with animal characters, this is jarring. The male characters are more realistically drawn to their animal counterpart, while the women become a nature's abomination. Why, you may ask? Because if you want to make clear in an instance you have now introduced the female character, this is certainly a way to do it. After all, only a trained eye, like a breeder or animal specialist, could maybe see differences in sex without having to inspect the animal's genitals first. But this completely depends on the species and would only be visible to a certain eye, not the general population watching a movie. However, considering there were older cartoons that did not feel the need to draw such sharp differences in gender, we can conclude that it was a choice to add this. Pronouns work just fine for Gertie. In that same vein, Mickey could have been a genderless mouse for all I cared. But standing beside Minnie with her long eyelashes, heels, high skirt and smaller mouth, Minnie's gender got defined. But so did Mickey's. This pattern has gone on for a very, very, very long time. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with girls who are girly. It becomes wrong when it's the only type of girl children get to see on television. This is where the tomboys come in. Young girls who do not fit in the traditional female gender role set out for them. That's broadly put what a tomboy is. Girls that act more boyish and are active and don't care if they get messy, I guess. I don't know, I've always hated the word tomboy, but it's accurate for this video, so I'll push through. It's funny, but at some point in history, young girls were actually encouraged to be more tomboyish. This was so they could become stronger and later in life birth healthier children. Until the general population realized that being a tomboy is a gateway drug to becoming a lesbian, and suddenly being a tomboy was the last thing you wanted your little girl to be. Trick question for the audience. Where are the tom men? They don't exist. The biggest staple of the tomboy narrative is that the tomboy must be tamed. She cannot grow up continuing her boyish ways. Eventually, she must conform to traditional womanhood and the patriarchy. In general, there are two paths through which this taming happens, either through romance or violence. With romance, the tomboy learns that her dreams are unrealistic and she gets paired off with a boy. She accepts her traditional role as a wife and a woman, and that's that. The other path of taming is one of violence. Something happens to the tomboy that she rethinks her ambitions and draws back into traditional femininity. Crudely put,
and if the main character is a girl, make sure she's married by the end. Or dead, either way.
Excuse me?
Jo March is actually one of the most prominent tomboys in English literature. The entire story, she wishes she was a boy and loves her independence and wants to become a famous writer. But then she gets paired off to a man in the end, and that somehow is fine too. Even the famous Jo March, perhaps the first example of a tomboy that comes to mind, couldn't escape the taming fate. And you'd think that this whole concept is obsolete. Surely in the 21st century we've cut ties with these ideas of traditional womanhood where the woman is an obedient housewife. But no, this tradition continued to exist. When I was a teen, I knew that an adult version of me could not exist. that I had to conform to femininity and mold myself into a gender that did not suit me. Back then, there was a whole whopping 2 characters that somewhat represented that struggle within me. Sam Bucket and Toph Beifong, both of whom utterly betrayed me, or so it felt like at the time. Because the taming process still exists, but in subtler ways. Far more common in my childhood days was the transformation episode. And I knew, I don't know how or where I picked it up, but I knew that this episode would always come. It would rip the precious few characters I could relate to out of my tiny hands, and the message I received at that young age was crystal clear. We will ignore how you identify for now, as long as you conform to society's expectations once you go through puberty. Needless to say, I was extremely protective of Toph and Sam. They represented me. And then they did this. In I Make Sam Girlier, Sam is dissatisfied that people only see her as violent and wants to make herself more girly. First of all, how dare you? Sam, how could you? We run away from girly things, not towards it. Anyway, Sam tries to be more feminine while looking like she's having a drill hammering down her root canal. In the episode, he even played that awful woo track while Sam steps onto screen when she's girlified. Stop it! You ruined a perfectly good tomboy is what you did! Look at her! She's wearing makeup! Same thing happened to Toph. In Tales of Ba Sing Se, Katara takes Toph to a spa day, and they get dolled up, and Toph doesn't seem into it at first, but at the end she goes,
Well, that wasn't so bad.
Toph! No! That was bad! Why aren't you crawling out of your own skin? I thought we were one, Toph! I thought we were one! I watched both episodes back for this video, and honestly, they aren't the traumatizing episodes I remembered them to be. It's less about conforming to the norm as I interpreted it back then, and more about self-acceptance. But when you're a child, and everything around you tells you you are a girl, and you have to wear dresses and makeup, and all the other girls like the color pink and dolls, why can't you like it too, huh? You start to feel so suffocated by all these expectations that don't fit you. And ironically enough, there's no way you can process that message of self-acceptance. I cried so hard when I saw those episodes. It felt like I lost a piece of myself. And I stopped watching both shows for months after that, as if I needed to mourn the tomboy character that was once again taken from me. But then something happened. While Sam got forced to put on makeup, the ultimate betrayal, and was occasionally seen wearing dresses, Toph stayed Toph. Oh yes, Toph is unique even within the tomboy narrative. And it's much more than that she can defeat guys 3 times her size with ease. 2 episodes prior to her introduction, Aang gets a vision of her in the swamp. The girl he sees is very different from the girl the gang encounters in the ring. He even emphasizes this when they are asking around for the blind bandit.
That's because we're asking about the wrong person. In my vision, I saw a girl in a white dress with a pet flying boar.
They learn that Toph is the daughter of the wealthy Beifong family, who have kept Toph a secret from the outside world. Her parents believe that she is helpless due to her blindness and treat her like a porcelain doll. Someone who can't go into the backyard unescorted or blow on her own soup. Where Toph was bratty, sarcastic, confrontational and confident in the ring, she's the complete opposite in her home. She's seen wearing a long dress instead of the white pants and shirt in the ring. It is clear that this is not her way of dressing, but her parents'. She keeps her excellent bending skills a secret from her parents, who frankly wouldn't trust her bending a pebble. Late at night, she even tells Aang straight up that her parents don't understand, that they have casted her away as a helpless girl and refuse to see anything else. This is also the scene where we learn that Toph's disability is a strength in many ways. When she points out feeling ants crawling through the vibrations of the earth, we see Aang looking confused, clearly not seeing the ants at all. At at the age of 12, we already see two different Tophs, one of whom is completely fabricated to fit into the role her parents have set out for her. We also learn that Toph is fully aware of this two-split when she tells Aang. And while this is largely to do with her bending, it is also important to see how different she acts whenever she isn't in the presence of her parents.
What are you doing here, Twinkle Toes?
Her body language shifts, even while still dressed the way her parents would want. She's like a different person. Toph would never stand like this in the presence of her parents, but she does with Aang. And if this sounds reminiscent of a queer person trapped in a conservative environment, it's because it's kind of exactly like that. And like any coming out narrative, her family eventually finds out. After the fight, Toph tells the truth to her parents. A glimpse of pride shining through it as she tells about her earthbending and hopes her parents will understand. This too has queer written all over it.
I know I've kept my life secret from you, but you were keeping me secret from the whole world. So now that you see who I really am, I hope it doesn't change the way you feel about me.
But the conclusion her father draws is that he has given Toph too much freedom and sends the Avatar away. The episode concludes with Toph running away from home and joining the gang. But the episode doesn't end there. Toph's father essentially puts a bounty on her head and tells these two men to bring Toph home. Circling back to the tomboy narrative, this moment is the setup for Toph's taming arc. According to her dad, Toph's way of living is unacceptable. She has to be dragged back to a place where she is not allowed to be herself, where she is forced to put up a persona tailored to her parents' wishes. He is so deep in his own delusions that he simply refuses to see Toph in any other light than the one he has painted for her. Toph couldn't possibly have run away. No.
The Avatar has kidnapped my daughter.
My man, what the actual fuck? In the episodes that follow, we see more of Toph's true personality come true, which leads to a few confrontations, mostly with Katara. Toph is so used to having to fend for herself that teamwork doesn't come easy to her. You can tell nobody ever met her halfway in her actual needs. People decided for her who she had to be a long time ago, so exploring who she is was a task she had to do on her own, in secret. It makes sense that she doesn't trust anyone else when it comes to lodging or hunting for food. She even abandons the group for a bit, and only after some advice from Iroh does she realize that teamwork isn't the same as being bossed around like at home. Toph also has absolutely no problem calling out any group dynamic or character trait she deems unreasonable. Lovable Appa doesn't get a pass either. Most of the time she has a point, but there's a fallout regardless because Toph has the subtlety of a boulder. Other boulder. When they enter Ba Sing Se, she's the only one of the group who isn't impressed. She knows what awaits her here, and it's more of the same as back home. Rules and limitations. People telling you what to do and not giving you proper answers. Toph, being the only one brought up in the Earth Kingdom and knowing its rigid traditions, was once again spot on. The gang gets constantly pushed back, told off, and quickly realize the bureaucratic nature of the city. They only get stuff done once they start actively ignoring the law.
Yeah, let's break some rules!
One dismantling of the secret police later, and the party temporarily splits up. Toph got a letter from her mother that she's in town and wants to meet up. At this point it's been several episodes and you may have completely forgotten about the taming subplot, but this is a violent taming if I ever saw one. The ladder was a facade and the kidnappers are back. The tomboy had her fun. She ran away long enough and now it's time to return to normality. In so many other tomboy narratives, this event will be so traumatizing that the tomboy would rethink her ambitions and adjust them to be more acceptable within patriarchal society. Toph's ambitions get straight up challenged in this episode.
You might think you're the greatest earthbender in the world, but even you can't bend metal.
Toph realizes that metal is just refined earth, and with some trying manages to bend herself out of the metal box.
Woo! Toph, you rule.
This moment right here blows my mind. What is supposed to be her taming moment in the tomboy narrative is actually an affirmation of Toph's choice to leave that path behind. Her unique way of bending ensured that she could accomplish what nobody had done before her: bend metal. In this moment, she solidifies herself as the greatest earthbender that exists. And she did it by defying what was expected from her, by refusing to give up and actually going deeper down her own path. Not only is this scene incredible narratively speaking, through the tomboy lens it additionally tells us that gender nonconformity is achievable and desirable. It tells us that tomboys should not get tamed, that they should be allowed to continue their ambitions and not conform to what is expected from them, as the tomboy way will lead them to improve on what is already there, and be the very best at it too.
I am the greatest earthbender in the world! Don't you two dunderheads ever forget it!
It's funny because after this, Toph doesn't really get an arc anymore. She's obviously part of the gang and has a few episodes where she's a leading player, like the episode The Runaway. But even in this episode, it's Katara's character and point of view that gets the emphasis. It's about Katara as a mother figure to the group and how both comforting and confronting that can be.
She's compassionate and kind, and she actually cares about me. You know, the real me. That's more than my own mom.
Part of me isn't surprised by this sudden lack of character development, as the natural ending to the tomboy narrative has been subverted. But where do you go from there? Well, nowhere, really. Toph's personal challenge has been faced and conquered. The narrative has told us that Toph was right to leave, that it was right to shed the persona she was forced to craft to please her parents. Even if it did hurt to leave her parents, the action is justified by the narrative. Another interesting note is that Toph is the only one of Team Avatar who doesn't get paired off in the end. This means that the violent taming didn't come to fruition, and the taming through romance never made an appearance in the narrative. This lack of romance on its own is a subversion of heteronormative ideology. Michael Warner calls this reprosexuality, an interweaving of heterosexuality, biological reproduction, cultural reproduction, and personal identity. Through his definition, the idea of heteronormativity gets well defined. It is not just about having interest in the same gender, it is the lack of a relationship or interest in the opposite gender that is suspicious on its own. A keen eye would say that Toph does display some form of heteroactivity, as she is seen blushing around Zuko and Sokka. However, at this point both boys are in a relationship and Toph is several years younger. Thus, she isn't really a viable or serious romantic contender for them. In fact, the only romantic coded gesture Toph does is kiss a cheek. Suki's cheek, to be precise, which I find both hilarious and frustrating, because how queer-coded can one character get? But it is framed as if Sokka was going to save her. Romantic music even swells up when Toph gasps,
Oh, Sokka, you saved me! Mwah! Actually, it's me. Oh, well, you can go ahead and let me drown now.
but Toph is the only female character who gets to kiss another female character on the cheek in the animated series, including the sequel Legend of Korra, who actually has two bisexual women ending up together. But due to censorship, the creators were not allowed to make it more explicit than the metaphorically walking into the sunset they had animated. Instead, they had to clarify Korra and Asami were in a romantic relationship in 2 Tumblr posts of all things. Thus, a female character kissing another female character as little as on the cheek is not acceptable unless the context in which it is presented is one of heterosexuality. You owe me some gay kisses, friend. Speaking of Legend of Korra, while this is a close reading of Toph in Avatar The Last Airbender, I do want to briefly touch upon her portrayal in the sequel. I know this sounds weird, but I'm actually quite happy that Toph was depicted as a terrible mother. It would be nothing like Toph to suddenly be the caring and motherly type. That would mean she was tamed after all. Instead, she becomes an elderly forest spirit who checks up on her family through 3 vines. Far more appropriate for Toph, I'd say. Despite not being labeled as queer in or by the show, Toph had no romance in the original series, and in the sequel the romances were off-screen, and none of these pairings lasted. Combined with how she remained unpunished for her gender nonconformity, it is a marvel to me till this day that Toph was allowed to exist. Because it meant that I was allowed to exist. Toph became a resource for queer children and teens, even to those who did not realize it at the time, myself included, by simply refusing to participate. Cool, you taught me a brand new perspective on Toph. Are we done now? Absolutely not. I dismiss you, not the bell. Sit down. Perhaps you've been thinking about some other queer-coded characters you identify with as a kid. And while I have neither the time nor the resources to talk about every single character ever created, I did want to highlight Toph's uniqueness by contrasting her story to that of Mulan. There are enough similarities to make this feasible. Both characters don't fit in the typical female gender role that is presented to them within their narratives. The worlds are steeped in Asian culture, animated by American studios. They are both designed in 2D, and they are presented more masculine or have to present as an actual man. Hell, Toph was originally pitched as a boy, until head writer Aaron Ehasz pushed back so hard Toph got gender bended into a girl. And as our law demands, we say a little thank you prayer to Aaron every morning, noon and night. Now I know that Mulan is a beloved character, and for many has been that character that Toph was for me. Unfortunately, I did not feel that way myself, and I will be rather critical of the film. This, by the way, does not mean you're bad for loving Mulan or you're somehow in the wrong. The beauty of media analysis is that multiple interpretations can be true at the same time. For example, if you want a more positive view on the movie Mulan, I do recommend watching Accented Cinema's video essay A Case of Failed Empowerment. It honestly made me rethink some of my own arguments and really made me see the movie in a different light. Because dear God, do I wish I could see what he's seeing. It's a beautiful sentiment and wonderful conclusive argument that gender diversity and even drag is the eventual strength of the protagonist. Holy crap, what an incredible message! Then why do I still feel othered? Why do I still feel like being me is a joke? I'll tell you why. Clock, 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 double fucking clock. I can clock the shit out of every character. Not because I want to, but because the movie does everything in its power to remind us. If you want to view Mulan through a trans lens, which you can do very easily, before you get to the ending where Mulan is the hero of her story, you have to sit through 80 minutes of painfully agonizing trans and gender non-conforming jokes that only seem to highlight the differences between men and women.
Ah, I see you have a sword. I have one too.
And all cause Miss Man decides to take a little drag show on the road.
And there's nothing you girls can do about it.
My eyes can see straight through your armor. Oh! You the man! Well, sort of.
Stand watch, Mushu, while I blow our secret with my stupid girly habits.
Your great-granddaughter had to be a cross-dresser!
They're disgusting.
No, they're men.
Did they send me daughters when I asked for sons?
Get it? It's funny because they did send a daughter. When you're a kid and you have no way to articulate how you feel or why you don't feel like a girl, the story of Mulan isn't empowering. It's a 90 minutes fever dream going through your worst nightmare. For example, there's an entire scene where Mulan bathes. And then the guys enter.
We're doomed! There are a couple of things I know they're bound to notice.
This scene evokes such a primal fear in me as a non-binary person you wouldn't believe. It's the bathroom panic through the eyes of a trans person in ancient 2D China. My gender dysphoria gets triggered so hard when I watch this scene.
Oh, hi guys. I didn't know you were here. I was just washing, so now I'm clean and I'm gonna go. Bye-bye.
Every single time I had to share a locker room with girls flashes before my eyes and engulfs my mind with memories overlapping on top of each other within one single razor-sharp and agonizing frame. When I had to share a locker room, I never, not even for 1 second, felt comfortable. Your friends are all having fun while you awkwardly hide to the side thinking, please don't look at me, this body was given to me and I hate it, do not perceive me, I do not want to be here, I'm not supposed to be here, gender, made a mistake, I'll just redress as quickly as I can and be out of this room so fast you probably wondered if I was even here. And I think, ultimately, it's that recognition That makes it difficult for me to see the cross-dressing in this movie as empowering. The audience is made aware of Mulan's true gender identity. Same goes for the few cross-dressing moments, which means that her identity is framed as a deception. Just listen to the music cue when Li Shang finds out Ping isn't a man. He's binding! If you read Mulan, or Ping, as a trans man, this scene is disproportionately cruel. Your medical doctor breaks confidentiality and tells on you to your boss. He steps in and finds out you are indeed transgender. Then another person drags you in front of all your colleagues, misgenders and outs you.
A woman!
And then you get sentenced to literal death for not being the correct gender. The only reason Ping doesn't get executed right on that spot is because he saved Li Shang's life a second ago.
A life for a life. My debt is repaid.
Holy shit, this is not fun. I'm not having fun. This is painful to watch. Let's go to Toph. The difference between Mulan and Toph is immediate because Toph isn't pretending to be anyone else. Through her character, we actually get to see how performative gender is. Toph dresses fairly masculine. The way she is animated is pretty masculine too. This is mostly due to the strong element that she bends. Because Toph is an earthbender, she gets to move in ways that tend to be labeled as masculine. This difference in movement becomes apparent in the episode Bitter Work. As an airbender, Aang is swift and light on his feet, and therefore teasingly called Twinkle Toes by Toph. Throughout the episode, we see him fly away whenever danger hits him, and is having trouble earthbending as that is his natural opposite. Meanwhile, Toph is abrasive, doesn't hold back to yell at Aang, and holds a sturdy earthbending stance. Of the two, Toph comes off as more masculine because of these traits. The show even pokes at this dynamic in the episode The Ember Island Players. Which, side note, can we talk about how genius this episode is? A summarization of 3 seasons before the big final, all while poking fun at your own show? 10 out of 10. Anyway, the gang goes to a comically bad play that depicts their entire adventure. All of them are portrayed like caricatures, and Toph is no exception. But the difference is that Toph is the only one happy with her portrayal. Which is quite exceptional, because a character is, well... While Team Avatar is laughing in their seats, Toph couldn't be happier. Katara is all too slick to repeat Toph's words how what's portrayed on stage is the truth.
It hurts, doesn't it? Are you kidding me? I wouldn't have cast it any other way.
And I don't think her enthusiasm means she wants to be a man, but that her gender isn't all defining to her. Which is a big contrast to Aang, who feels emasculated for being portrayed by a lady in a bold cap. It shows that Toph sees her gender identity as more fluent than Aang. Her gender performance and perception of gender fall outside the norm anyway. Why should a man performing as her bother her? So far I've talked about how gender is performative, and you may be scratching your head at what that actually means. Without going too deep into the theory of gender performativity itself, I do want to apply this theory to Toph's character. Hopefully that way it will be more digestible. Because funnily enough, there is another Avatar episode where gender performativity is shown very clearly. That episode being City of Walls and Secrets. Team Avatar wants to talk to the Earth King and decide they have to infiltrate a party to get close to him. Toph immediately points out the flaw in their plan. Y'all fuckers won't pass.
A real society crowd would spot you a mile away.
What Toph explains here is that the gang has never learned the proper etiquettes that rule high society. They would never fit into that society because they were never taught the rules they'd have to adhere to. When Katara points out that Toph isn't exactly Lady Fancy Fingers, Toph replies,
I learned proper society behavior and chose to leave it. You never learned anything.
And this is true. Even if it is established that Toph is generally the filthiest of the team, you have to have learned the rules in the first place if you want to demonstrate you're rebelling against it, like Toph is. When we finally see her dressed up in an attire that would be appropriate for a girl of her status, it looks so wrong. Her feminine clothes don't read as natural on Toph's body. It even looks slightly off on Katara, who has been fabulously feminine throughout the series, but not quite as dolled up as in this episode. This moment illustrates how performative gender norms are in the first place. It exposes its non-natural elements by giving us an example of what would be considered appropriate in high society, but looks so alien on Toph's body. All you think is, this look isn't Toph, It's ridiculous. What the hell was wrong with how Toph looked before? Exactly, there wasn't anything wrong with it at all. High society just didn't give Toph a choice to express how she wanted to be. Either she had to conform or she had to leave. So she left, leaving behind everything she'd ever known so she could create a space for herself within the world, where she did get accepted for exactly who she is. Notice how this approach is like a complete 180 from Mulan. Yes, Mulan too didn't gain honor in the traditional feminine role that was laid out for her, but to restore honor to her family, she couldn't be who she was at all. She once again had to hide and conform, but this time to a masculine role within society. Isn't that what all those cringy jokes are about? How bad she is at passing? When Toph leaves home, she finally can let go of deceiving her family of who they wanted her to be. But Mulan's family loves and accepts her for who she is, even when she fails the matchmaker's test.
But look, this one's late. But I'll bet that when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful of all.
When Mulan leaves her home, that's where the deception starts. So, in a way, Mulan already had what Toph wanted and needed, an accepting environment. The reason why Mulan goes to war is, for the most part, so her father doesn't have to, who is heavily foreshadowed to die in battle because of his injuries. The conflict of not bringing honor to her family in becoming a dutiful wife is resolved literally in the scene that gets interrupted by the war declaration.
What is it?
At the end of the movie, Mulan goes back to her family where she feels loved and accepted. And the more I think about it, I do love that ending better than her accepting to work for the Emperor. Because having your family's acceptance over societal acceptance just hits different, right? Having people you love you in return, that's everything, whether it's found family or actual relatives. But then, on a silver platter, a suitable future husband in the shape of Li Shang walks in. And I know bisexual king we stand, but it still is a heavily implied classic taming through marriage narrative. Not only did Mulan get accepted by her family, by her fallen soldiers, the actual emperor, and the entire country, now she also found acceptance by falling back into the role she was destined to have at the start of this movie. Wow, all fixed. See, fellow gays? You too can be accepted by society by just simply saving your whole country and then falling back into the exact societal expectation you failed at before. It just works. Okay, I just digress, but for me this is exactly why I have such conflicting feelings about Mulan. Mulan manages to find acceptance by following the established norms, just in an unexpected way. However, she still conforms to that norm. Bring honor to your family. That's the whole goal set within this movie. She did that in both the traditional masculine and feminine way. She just had to cross-dress for the masculine part.
Family honor.
Honor!
Dishonor.
Dishonor!
Dishonor!
With honor!
Honor.
Honor.
Honor!
Toph never conforms. When she cross-dresses, it's always around high society. She's essentially performing as the gender and class society expects her to be in the first place. But with Team Avatar, Toph is allowed to be exactly who she is. To me, that is a far more honest portrayal of what being queer is. After all, there are parts of society that will never accept you for who you are. You might feel invisible and not seen by people you love, like Toph with her parents. And if you decide to conform, you have to sacrifice yourself in the process. How could that be worth it? And isn't that more powerful in a way? To not have everything magically work out like Mulan? We see Toph's conflicting feelings about leaving her parents. And I'm sure that decision will always weigh on her, despite knowing it was best to leave. That's so human to me, to still have a little bit of regret, even when you made the right decision. It's why I adore Avatar so much, and I remember even appreciating this as a child. It felt like, for the first time, a kids show took us seriously. The children are able and willing to see series that are complex, are willing to ask difficult questions, and give us a story that doesn't get neatly wrapped with a bow on top. Toph may not have been canonically queer, but she was most definitely queer-coded. And while I'm thrilled that we have canonically queer characters in kids shows these days, that doesn't mean Toph's story has lost its value. If anything, it shows that our stories have always been told, because we queer folk know when we are being portrayed on screen, even when the writers don't. And when I needed her the most, Toph welcomed me with open arms.